Every year, millions of people disappear, not physically, but mentally. They wake up, go to work, smile, talk, yet inside something has already died. And the most dangerous part is most people around them never notice. So, what exactly is depression? Is it sadness or is it a brain slowly turning against itself? Let's step inside the mind of depression. Let's talk about Alex. Alex was 26 years old. He had a stable job, a loving family, a few close friends. Nothing about his life looked unusual. Every morning, he woke up at 7, brushed his teeth, got dressed, drove to work, smiled at his coworkers, even laughed at their jokes. If you meet Alex, you'd probably think he's doing just fine, because from the outside, he looked completely normal. But every single day, something invisible was happening inside his mind. When people think about depression, they usually imagine someone crying, someone who never leaves their room, someone who looks broken. But psychology tells us something very different. Many people suffering from depression become experts at pretending that nothing is wrong. And Alex had been pretending for almost 2 years. Every smile was rehearsed, every laugh was forced, every conversation was simply another performance to convince the world that he was okay, even though deep inside he no longer remembered what okay actually felt like. Alex couldn't remember the last time he genuinely felt excited, not because his life was bad. If you looked at his life from the outside, you'd probably wish to have it. He was 26, he had a stable job, a small apartment, people who cared about him. Nothing seemed out of place, yet every morning before opening his eyes, he would ask himself the same question: do I really have to do this again? Not because he hated his job, not because he hated his life, he was simply too exhausted to exist. One Monday morning, his alarm rang. He reached for his phone, turned the alarm off, and stared at the ceiling. 5 minutes passed, then 20, then 40. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't scrolling. He was negotiating with his own mind. Just stand up. Nothing happened. Come on. Still nothing. It felt as if his own body had become heavier overnight. Eventually, he forced himself out of bed, not because he wanted to, because he had to. At work, nobody noticed anything. He smiled, answered emails, joined meetings, even laughed at a joke he barely heard. By the time he returned home, he collapsed onto his couch without even taking off his shoes. The television played for hours, not because he was watching it, because silence somehow felt even heavier. Days passed. Nothing terrible happened. Nothing amazing happened either. Life simply repeated itself. Until one evening, his younger sister knocked on his apartment door. She smiled, held up 2 movie tickets, and said, "Come on, you have been working too much. You need a break." Alex looked at the tickets, then looked at her, and quietly replied, "Maybe next time." There would never be a next time. Not because he didn't love spending time with her, but because something inside him was slowly disappearing, and he still didn't know what it was. The next morning, Alex actually went to the movies. Not because he wanted to, because he didn't want to disappoint his sister. She was excited, she laughed, talked about the film, bought popcorn, and kept asking, "Are you having fun?" Alex smiled, "Yeah." But he wasn't watching the movie. His eyes were fixed on the screen, yet his mind was somewhere else. When everyone else laughed, Alex laughed too. A second later, just enough to make it look real. On the drive home, his sister finally asked, "Can I ask you something?" Alex nodded. She said, "You have changed. You barely answer your phone. You never come out with us. Did I do something wrong?" Alex immediately looked at her and shook his head. "No, you didn't." She waited, hoping he'd explain, but he couldn't, because the truth was he didn't understand it either. How you do explain that nothing feels wrong, yet nothing feels right either? How do you explain that you are surrounded by people who love you, yet you still feel completely alone? That night, Alex stood in front of the bathroom mirror. He stared at his own reflection for several seconds, then quietly whispered, "I don't recognize myself anymore." To reveal something most people misunderstand, depression doesn't always make people cry. Sometimes it simply makes them feel less excitement, less motivation, less energy, less hope. It's as if someone slowly turns down the volume on every emotion your brain can feel, until one day, even the things you once loved feel strangely silent. Alex wasn't losing his life, he was slowly losing his ability to experience it. Over the next few weeks, things become stranger. Alex stopped listening to music, Not because he disliked it, because it didn't make him feel anything anymore. The songs that once gave him goosebumps now sounded like background noise. One evening, his mother called, "Your dad's birthday is this Sunday. You'll come, right?" Alex looked at the calendar. He wanted to say yes. He quietly replied, "I don't think I can." There was a long silence. His mother sighed. "You have been saying that for months." After hanging up, Alex stayed at the phone. A wave of guilt hit him. He loved his parents. He missed them. So why did every invitation feel like a burden? The next day, things got even worse. At work, his manager handed him a project. One that would have taken Alex less than an hour. He opened his laptop, read the first page, then the second, then the first page again. Nothing stayed in his mind. His thought felt slow, foggy, scattered. After 20 minutes, he realized he hadn't written a single sentence. That frightened him, not because the work was difficult, but because his own brain didn't feel like his anymore. That evening, he searched the internet. Why am I always tired? Why can't I focus? Why don't I enjoy anything anymore? Thousands of answers appeared: stress, burnout, lack of sleep, vitamin deficiency. He closed the laptop. None of them explained what he was feeling. And that's exactly why depression often gets unnoticed. Because it rarely arrives all at once. It steals tiny pieces of your life, one by one. First your excitement, then your motivation, then your concentration, until one day you wake up and realize you don't remember what happiness used to feel like. 2 weeks later, Alex finally did something he had been avoiding for almost a year. He booked an appointment with a psychologist. The night before the session, he almost cancelled it. His mind kept telling him that nothing would change, that nobody would understand, that maybe this was just who he had become. But the next morning, he forced himself to walk through the clinic door. The psychologist didn't offer him a magical solution. She didn't tell him to stay positive or stop overthinking. Instead, she simply listened. For the first time in months, Alex spoke without pretending to be okay. He talked about the exhaustion, the emptiness, the guilt, and the strange feeling that he was slowly disappearing. Then she explained something that completely changed the way Alex saw himself. Depression wasn't proof that he was weak. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't a lack of willpower. It was a real psychological condition that changes the way the brain processes emotion, motivation, reward, and even hope. The reason everyday tasks felt impossible wasn't because Alex had stopped trying. It was because his brain had stopped rewarding the effort. For months, he had been blaming himself for symptoms he never chose to have. Recovery didn't happen overnight. Some mornings were still difficult, some days still felt empty, but slowly, through therapy, health routines, support from the people who loved him, and professional treatment, tiny changes began to appear. One day, he replied to a friend's message without forcing himself. Another day, he cooked dinner instead of skipping another meal. Weeks later, he laughed at something and realized it was the first genuine laugh he had had in a very long time. Months later, Alex walked back into the same restaurant where he was once at, feeling absolutely nothing. He took a bite of his favorite meal, paused for a second, and smiled. It wasn't overwhelming happiness, it wasn't a dramatic movie ending. It was simply the feeling he thought he had lost forever, slowly finding its way back. Depression doesn't make someone weak, it convinces them that they always were. And that's the biggest lie the brain can ever tell. If someone around you has become unusually quiet, keeps saying they are just tired, or slowly disappears from the life they once lived, don't be so quick to judge them. Sometimes the strongest people are fighting battles you'll never able to see. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't surviving alone, it's asking for help. Because healing doesn't begin when the pain disappears. It begins the moment someone believes that recovery is possible.